There is a moment after you disappear from someone's life when something strange begins to happen. At first, they feel relieved. They tell themselves they don't care. They convince themselves that you're going to come back. They expect your name to appear on their phone. They expect you to break the silence. They expect you to miss them more than they miss you. And when you don't, something inside them begins to change because your absence creates a psychological space that your presence never could. When you were always there, she could take you for granted. She knew where you were. She knew what you were doing. She knew that if she wanted your attention, she could probably get it. But when you disappear completely, certainty disappears with you, and uncertainty is where the mind begins to work. If you want to understand why silence can sometimes be more powerful than 1,000 messages, stay with me. And if you want more psychological insights about human behavior, power, relationships, and self-mastery, subscribe to Human Psychology Hub, because the deeper you understand people, the less easily they can control you. Here's the first thing you need to understand. People rarely understand the value of something while they still have unlimited access to it. They understand it when access is removed. Think about it. When someone knows you will always answer, your answer has little psychological weight. When someone knows you'll always forgive, forgiveness becomes expected. When someone knows you'll always return, your absence doesn't feel permanent. But when the pattern suddenly changes, the mind becomes alert. It asks, why did he stop? What happened? Did he finally move on? Did I lose him? Is he with someone else? Was he more valuable than I realized? And notice what is happening. You aren't putting those thoughts into her head. Your absence is. This is one of the strange laws of human psychology. The mind often becomes obsessed with what it can no longer access. We tend to overvalue what is scarce, and we tend to undervalue what is constantly available. This is why chasing someone after they pull away usually produces the opposite of what you want. You think you're showing love. But psychologically, you may be teaching them that they don't have to fear losing you. You keep explaining. You keep texting. You ask for another chance. You send the long paragraph. You tell them how much you miss them. And for a moment, you feel better because you've released the emotion. But you've also removed the uncertainty. She knows you're still there. She knows you haven't moved on. She knows she still has access to you. And therefore, she has no reason to wonder, no reason to reflect, no reason to experience the psychological weight of your absence. This is why the strongest move after rejection or disrespect is often not another argument. It's withdrawal, not revenge, not punishment, not manipulation, withdrawal. You stop trying to convince someone of your value. You simply stop offering unlimited access to it. And that's where time enters the equation. Because time does something that words cannot. Time changes memory. When you're constantly present, someone remembers your flaws. They remember the arguments. They remember the annoying habits. They remember the moments when you disappointed them. But when you disappear, something interesting can happen. The emotional intensity of the negative moments begins to fade. The mind starts editing the past, and suddenly, memories that seemed ordinary become meaningful. The restaurant you went to, the joke only the two of you understood, the way you used to call, the way you listened, the way you looked at her, the small things she never appreciated while they were happening. Absence turns ordinary moments into memories, and memories are dangerous because the mind can romanticize them. This is why someone can tell themselves, I'm completely over him, and then months later suddenly find themselves thinking about him. Not because you magically controlled their mind, because distance gave their mind room to process what proximity prevented them from seeing. When you're always arguing with someone, they experience you emotionally. When you're gone, they experience you psychologically, and those are two very different things. This is also why you should never disappear for the purpose of making someone panic. That is still dependence. Because you're secretly watching, you're checking whether she's online, you're looking at her stories, you're asking mutual friends about her, you're counting how many days have passed, you're hoping she'll contact you. That's not absence, that's emotional attachment disguised as silence. Real distance is different. Real distance means you stop making her reaction the center of your life. You don't disappear and sit around waiting for her to notice. You disappear because you have decided that your attention is valuable enough to be placed somewhere better. And that distinction changes everything, because the moment you stop trying to control her reaction, you regain control of yourself. This is where most people fail. They think the objective is, how do I make her miss me? But that's the wrong question. The better question is, how do I become so grounded in my own life that whether she misses me or not no longer determines my behavior? That is power. Because desperation is always trying to produce an outcome. Strength can tolerate uncertainty, and uncertainty is exactly what time creates. Imagine two people after a breakup. The first person sends messages every few days. How are you? I still miss you. Can we talk? Just give me one chance. The second person disappears, not angrily, not dramatically. No cryptic social media posts, no jealousy games, no attempts to make the other person jealous. He simply continues living. He works, he exercises, he sees his friends, he develops his skills, he travels, he becomes occupied with his own direction. Months later, the psychological picture is completely different. The first person has made himself familiar, the second has become unknown. And the human mind is naturally curious about what it cannot completely understand. She may begin wondering, what is he doing now? Why hasn't he contacted me? Did he really move on? Was I wrong about him? Why doesn't he seem affected anymore? And here's the paradox. The more desperately you want someone to ask those questions, the less likely you are to create the conditions for them. Because obsession with their reaction makes you behave predictably. You check, you react, you post, you contact, you return. But when you genuinely detach, your behavior becomes unpredictable, not because you're playing games, but because your life no longer revolves around them. And unpredictability creates curiosity. This is one reason mystery has such psychological power. If someone knows everything about you, there is little left to discover. But if you leave space, the mind fills that space. And what the mind fills in is often more powerful than reality. She doesn't know what you're thinking anymore. She doesn't know whether you're still emotionally attached. She doesn't know whether you've changed. She doesn't know who you're becoming. And that uncertainty can make the past feel unfinished. But there is an even deeper psychological principle here. People often value something more after they realize they no longer control it. As long as she believes she can call you and you'll answer, your availability feels ordinary. The moment she realizes, I can't reach him whenever I want anymore, the relationship between you changes psychologically, because access has become conditional, and people notice when access disappears. This happens everywhere, in friendships, in business, in families, in relationships. Someone can ignore you for years because they assume you'll always be there. Then one day you stop explaining, you stop chasing, you stop asking for their approval, and suddenly they notice the silence, not because you became cruel, because the old pattern disappeared. And patterns are powerful. People become comfortable with patterns. If you always chase, they expect chasing. If you always forgive, they expect forgiveness. If you always initiate, they expect initiation. If you always return after being disrespected, they learn that disrespect has no real consequence. But when you break the pattern, you create a new reality. And sometimes that is the only way another person can finally understand what your presence meant. Now, this is where you need to be careful. There is a massive difference between Ev creating distance and using distance as a weapon. If your entire purpose is to make her suffer, you're still emotionally connected. You're still giving her control because your behavior is still organized around her. True detachment doesn't say, I'm going to disappear so she falls apart. It says, I'm no longer going to participate in a dynamic that destroys my peace. That's a completely different mindset. And ironically, it's also the mindset that makes your absence more powerful, because you're no longer performing. You're no longer trying to create jealousy. You're no longer uploading pictures just to get a reaction. You're no longer pretending to be happy while secretly checking whether she viewed your story. You simply become unavailable to the old version of the relationship, and then something remarkable happens. You begin changing. At first, The silence feels painful. You want to contact her. You want answers. You want closure. You want to know whether she still cares. But every day you resist the urge to return to the old pattern, something inside you strengthens. You discover that you can experience an emotion without obeying it. You can miss someone without contacting them. You can love someone without chasing them. You can remember someone without returning to them. And that is a form of emotional power most people never develop because most people confuse feeling with action. I miss her, therefore I should call. I'm angry, therefore I should respond. I feel rejected, therefore I should prove my worth. No, an emotion is information. It is not an order. And once you understand that, you stop being controlled by temporary emotional states. This is where your transformation begins. You stop asking, how can I make her come back? And you start asking, why was I willing to abandon myself just to keep someone? That question is far more uncomfortable, but it is also far more valuable because sometimes the person you're desperate to get back isn't even the person you actually miss. You miss the validation. You miss the attention. You miss the feeling of being chosen. You miss the version of yourself that existed when someone wanted you. And if you don't understand that distinction, you'll spend months chasing someone who was never actually good for you. Time reveals this. Distance reveals this. Silence reveals this. And eventually, you may reach a point where something strange happens. You stop wanting her to regret losing you. You stop wanting her to check your profile. You stop wanting her to send the message. You stop imagining her realizing what she lost. And you simply think, I hope she's well, but I'm moving forward. That's when you know you've actually won. Not because she came back, not because she suffered, not because she regretted anything, but because she no longer determines your emotional state. And if she does come back, something else has changed. You aren't meeting her from desperation anymore. You're meeting her from choice. You can ask, has anything actually changed? Does she respect me now? Is this relationship healthy? Are the old patterns gone? Do I genuinely want this person back? Those are completely different questions from, please don't leave me. That is the psychological transformation distance can create. You stop negotiating for love. You start evaluating whether love belongs in your life. And that is the point most people miss. The goal of absence is not to make someone fall apart. The goal of absence is to stop falling apart yourself. Because if you become emotionally stable only when someone is giving you attention, then they have enormous power over you. But if you can stand alone, if you can tolerate silence, if you can walk away from disrespect, if you can lose someone without losing yourself, then you become much harder to manipulate. And paradoxically, that is often when people begin treating you differently because people respond to boundaries, they respond to self respect. They respond to someone who doesn't desperately need their approval. The person who can leave has a different psychological presence from the person who is terrified of being abandoned. One says, choose me. The other says, I choose carefully. And those two energies are worlds apart. So if someone has walked away from you, don't immediately panic. Don't bombard them with messages. Don't write a novel explaining your feelings. Don't try to make them jealous. Don't beg. Don't threaten. Don't create fake mystery. And don't sit around waiting for them to fall apart. Give time the opportunity to do what time does naturally. Let emotions settle. Let memories breathe. Let the relationship become distant enough to be seen clearly. And most importantly, use that distance to rebuild yourself. Because the most powerful version of you isn't the one sitting alone, hoping she regrets leaving. It's the one who eventually becomes so focused on his own life that whether she regrets it becomes irrelevant. That's the final psychological shift. At the beginning, you think, I need her to miss me. Then, I need her to realize what she lost. Then, I need her to come back. But eventually, I don't need anything from her. And that sentence is freedom. Maybe she comes back. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she misses you. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she realizes your value. Maybe she never does. Your job is not to control the outcome. Your job is to become the kind of person who doesn't collapse when the outcome isn't what you wanted. Because time doesn't just reveal what other people feel. Time reveals who you are when nobody is watching. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone fall apart. It's becoming so complete without them that their absence no longer feels like a loss. It feels like the beginning of your life again. So let the silence exist. Let the distance exist. Let the unanswered questions exist. You don't need to rush in and fill every empty space, because sometimes the empty space is where the truth finally becomes visible. And if she eventually looks back and realizes what she lost, that's her realization. If she doesn't, that's her choice. Either way, you keep moving, because your ultimate power was never the ability to make someone miss you. It was the ability to walk away without abandoning yourself. And once you develop that power, you become someone who cannot be controlled by attention, rejection, silence, or absence. You become someone who can love deeply without becoming dependent. You can care without chasing. You can lose without destroying yourself. And you can walk away without needing the other person to regret it. That is what real emotional strength looks like. And once you understand that, you will never look at silence the same way again. The moment she realizes you're really gone, there is something people rarely understand about absence. It doesn't become powerful the moment you leave. It becomes powerful when the other person finally realizes that you're not coming back the way you used to. At first, she may not even notice. She may continue with her life. She may talk to her friends. She may go out. She may laugh. She may even look happier. And if you're watching from the outside, you might think she doesn't care. But that's where most people make their biggest mistake. They judge someone's emotions by what they can see. Human psychology doesn't work that simply. Someone can look completely unaffected while their mind is processing something very different underneath, because emotional reactions don't always appear immediately. Sometimes they arrive later. Sometimes they arrive when the distractions disappear. Sometimes they arrive at night. Sometimes they arrive when she hears a song. Sometimes they arrive when she walks past a place you used to visit together. Sometimes they arrive when she meets someone new and realizes that something is missing. And sometimes they arrive when she reaches for her phone out of habit and remembers that you're no longer there. That is when absence becomes real, because while you were present, she didn't have to imagine life without you. Now she does, and the human mind is extremely sensitive to contrast. We often don't understand how much something affected us until we experience the opposite. You don't understand silence until you've lived around noise. You don't understand warmth until you've felt cold. You don't understand someone's presence until you experience their absence. And this is why time can change perception. When the emotional conflict is fresh, the mind focuses on whatever hurt. But as time passes, the emotional intensity begins to fade, and what remains are memories. This is where nostalgia enters. Nostalgia is strange. It doesn't replay the past exactly as it happened. It edits it. It removes certain details. It softens certain conflicts. It highlights moments that once seemed insignificant. And suddenly, the person you couldn't wait to get away from becomes the person you find yourself remembering. Not because the past magically became perfect, but because distance changes the emotional lens through which the past is viewed. This is why you should never chase someone while they're emotionally overwhelmed. When someone is angry, defensive, or determined to leave, every explanation you give can sound like pressure. Every message becomes another reason to pull away. You think, if I can just explain myself properly, she'll understand. But emotions don't work like courtrooms. You can present 100 arguments. The other person can still reject them. And sometimes the most intelligent thing you can do is stop arguing with someone's current perception of you. Let time speak. Because time has something you don't have. Time has no agenda. Time isn't trying to convince anyone. Time simply allows emotions to change naturally. And this is why chasing destroys mystery. When you keep explaining yourself, you give someone your entire emotional position. They know what you're thinking. They know what you're feeling. They know you're still waiting. They know exactly where you stand. There is no uncertainty. But when you step away with dignity, you leave something behind. A question. What is he thinking now? That question can be more powerful than another 100 messages, because the mind hates incomplete stories. When something ends, Without complete psychological closure, the mind often continues returning to it. It searches for meaning. It replays conversations. It analyzes details. It asks what could have been different. And the longer there is no new information, the more the imagination begins filling the gaps. This is why silence can sometimes create more psychological activity than communication. Communication gives answers, silence creates questions, but there is something even deeper. Your absence doesn't just make her think about you, it can make her compare. And comparison is where your previous presence can suddenly become visible. Imagine that she meets someone new. At first, everything is exciting. New person, new conversations, new attention, new chemistry. But eventually reality appears. Maybe this person doesn't listen the way you did. Maybe he doesn't understand her humor. Maybe he doesn't remember the little things. Maybe he doesn't give her the same emotional safety. Maybe he talks too much. Maybe he doesn't understand her world. And suddenly something happens. She doesn't necessarily think, I want him back. She thinks something feels different. That's enough. Because now the memory of you has a new context. Before, you were simply the person who was there. Now, you're the person who is no longer there. And those are psychologically different identities. This is the paradox of human value. Sometimes people understand your contribution only after they experience life without it. But don't make the mistake of interpreting this as a reason to manipulate someone. You cannot manufacture genuine value through fake scarcity. If you disappear for 3 days just to make her nervous, you're playing a game. If you disappear because you genuinely decided to stop chasing someone who doesn't value you, that's self-respect. The difference isn't visible from the outside. It's visible inside you. One person is counting the hours. The other has stopped counting. One is checking whether she viewed the story. The other doesn't care. One is thinking, when will she come back? The other is thinking, what am I building next? That's the person who actually becomes powerful, because attention is energy, and wherever your attention goes, your life follows. If your attention remains fixed on someone who isn't choosing you, your life becomes smaller, your work suffers, your confidence suffers, your social life suffers, your health suffers. Your future becomes secondary to someone else's decision, and all because you're waiting for a message. Think about how strange that is. Someone can be physically absent from your life, yet occupy more space in your mind than anyone else. That's not love anymore. That's psychological captivity. And the way out isn't another conversation. It's reclaiming your attention. Start putting your attention somewhere that produces something. Your body, your career, your skills, your friendships, your ambitions, your environment, your future. Because every hour you spend trying to decode her behavior is an hour you're not investing in becoming the person you want to be. And here's something most people don't realize. When you genuinely improve your life, you don't need to announce it. You don't need to post motivational quotes. You don't need to upload pictures designed to make someone jealous. You don't need to show everyone how happy you are. Real transformation becomes obvious without explanation. Your energy changes, your confidence changes, your standards change, your conversations change, your posture changes, your decisions change. And eventually, even if she sees you again, she may notice something different. Not because you tried to look different, because you are different. Or different. This is the point where absence becomes something more than a relationship strategy. It becomes an identity transformation. You begin as the person asking, why did she leave? Then you become the person asking, what was I tolerating? Then, why did I need her approval so badly? Then, why did I abandon my standards just to keep someone? And finally, who do I want to become now? That last question changes everything, because the breakup stops being the center of the story. You become the center, and that is exactly when the psychological power shifts. Not because you gained power over her, because you stopped giving power away. You don't need to make her jealous. You don't need to make her regret anything. You don't need to prove that you're attractive. You don't need to show that other women want you. You don't need to become cold. You simply become unavailable to disrespect. That is a completely different kind of strength. And sometimes this is what makes someone look back, not because you manipulated them, but because the person they remember no longer exists. The desperate version is gone. The constantly available version is gone. The version that tolerated everything just to keep the relationship alive is gone. And now there is someone who can say, I cared about you deeply, but I care about myself enough to walk away from what isn't healthy. That sentence carries more weight than, please don't leave me, because love without self respect eventually becomes dependency, and dependency creates fear. Fear creates chasing. Chasing creates pressure. Pressure creates distance. Distance creates more fear, and the cycle continues. The only way to break it is to stop feeding the cycle. Stop chasing, stop explaining, stop monitoring, stop negotiating, stop trying to force an emotional outcome. Let reality reveal itself. If she values you, she will have the opportunity to show it. If she doesn't, you will eventually discover something even more valuable, your freedom. And here's the part nobody tells you. Sometimes the person you wanted to return doesn't return, and that's okay, because sometimes their absence was the event that forced you to meet yourself. You discover your discipline, you discover your ambition, you discover your standards, you discover that you can survive rejection, you discover that loneliness doesn't kill you, you discover that being alone and being unwanted are not the same thing. And once you understand that, you stop fearing abandonment. You realize, I can lose someone and still have myself. That is one of the most powerful realizations a human being can have, because the person who fears losing someone will tolerate almost anything. But the person who knows they can walk away becomes extremely difficult to control. They don't need to threaten, they don't need to dominate, they don't need to manipulate. Their boundary is enough, and this is where time becomes your greatest teacher. At first, time feels like punishment. Every day feels long. You think about the past, you replay conversations, you imagine different endings. But slowly, something changes. The memories become quieter. The urge becomes weaker. The need for answers decreases. The emotional charge disappears. And one morning, you wake up and realize you haven't thought about her yet. That's when you know you're healing, not because you hate her, not because you forgot her, but because remembering her no longer controls your day. And ironically, this is often the moment when the past can return. Sometimes the person who left reaches out. Sometimes they send a simple, hey, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just two letters. But those two letters can reveal something important. The person who once assumed you would always be available is testing whether the door is still open. And now you have a choice, not a reaction. A choice. You don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to punish them with silence. You don't have to pretend you don't care. You simply ask yourself, what do I actually want? That's the difference between emotional maturity and emotional dependence. You respond according to your values, not according to your adrenaline. If you want them back, you can have an honest conversation. If you don't, you can respectfully move forward. But you no longer need their response to determine your worth. That is the real victory, because the strongest person isn't the one who makes someone else suffer. The strongest person is the one who can experience rejection without becoming bitter. They can experience loss without becoming desperate. They can experience love without losing themselves. They can walk away without turning the other person into an enemy. And they can let time reveal the truth. So don't obsess over how long it takes her to miss you. Don't count the days. Don't calculate when she will reach out. Don't build your life around the possibility that she will come back. Let time do its work. Your job is different. Your job is to become unavailable to the version of yourself that begged for attention. Become unavailable to disrespect. Become unavailable to emotional chaos. Become unavailable to relationships where you constantly have to prove your worth, and become available to your own potential. Because one day you may look back at this period and realize something unexpected. You weren't waiting for her. You were waiting for yourself. The stronger version, the calmer version, the more disciplined version, the version that doesn't chase what doesn't choose him, the version that doesn't confuse attention with love, the version that doesn't need someone else's regret to feel valuable. And when you become that person, something changes permanently. If she comes back, you are strong enough to decide. If she doesn't, you are strong enough to continue. Either way, you win, not because she falls apart, because you no longer do. And that is the real meaning of letting time work. You don't use time to destroy someone, you use time to reveal everything. What was real? What was temporary? What was attachment? What was love? What was ego? And most importantly, who you become when the person you thought you needed is no longer beside you. Sometimes losing someone feels like the end of your story, but months later, you realize it was the chapter where you finally stopped chasing someone else's approval and started building your own life. So let her have her space. Let yourself have yours. Don't force the ending. Don't chase the explanation. Don't interrupt the silence just because you're uncomfortable with it. Let time move. Let emotions settle. Let reality reveal itself. Because if someone truly belongs in your life, you won't have to destroy yourself to keep them there. And if they don't, then the greatest thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact. One day she may look back. She may remember. She may wonder. She may regret. She may even reach out. But by then, the most important question won't be, does she still want me? It will be, do I still want the life I had when I was begging her to stay? And if you've done the work, you may realize the answer is no, because you didn't lose her. You lost the version of yourself who thought losing her meant losing everything. And that version of you doesn't have to come back.